Hey, welcome back to another adventure with Jack. Today, I want to show you how to build a cookie cutter jig. A couple weeks ago, I did a video on how to make bowls with a router, and I used some cookies. And I've had some comments and questions on how I do my cookies. Well, I started with just a chainsaw, cutting cookies, and then having to put them on a flattening jig and use my router to flatten them. And all the cookies were all different sizes. It was hard to get them consistent. It was hard to get straight cuts with the router. And I spent a long time flattening those cookies. So I came up with a better solution, and that's what I'm going to show you today, is a jig and a cool little chainsaw blade that I picked up at Hobo Freight to put on a skill saw, which allows me to cut my cookies nice and square so I don't have to use a flattening jig, and worked out pretty slick. So I know you guys don't like to hear me talk, so let's jump into the video and I'll show you how I build it. Hey, how we all doing today? As you probably know, I love to work with cookies. You saw a video a couple weeks ago of me making bowls with them. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to make a jig to cut cookies. So that's what we're doing here. Using some 2x3s because they're cheap. And we're going to put something together to cut cookies. Now, you can cut them with a chainsaw or you can cut them on a bandsaw. Unfortunately, my bandsaw only has a 6-inch throat, so that doesn't work. And cutting them with a chainsaw works, but I always have trouble getting them flat. So then I've got to put them on a flattening jig and flatten them up with a router. And that's time consuming and it makes a huge mess. So I've got this cherry log, you can see there on the hand cart, and I decided to make some type of a jig to try to cut the cookies straighter initially so that I don't have to spend all the time on the flattening jig. So that's what we're going to do today. And if you like working with cookies, or if you've never tried it and you want to try, they work great for doing those bowls that you saw a couple weeks ago. They also work great for building stools. I do stools, just finish a cookie and make some legs out of rebar, and I've got a video coming up on that soon. I've started recording, and you've got a great little stool that's pretty solid, and it's unique, and it's kind of country, farmhousey. They also work great for plant stands. You can make them any height that you want. So lots of uses. I've also put some together and made some tables. If I have small cookies, I do it on the chop saw or the band saw, and you've seen that with the cedar cookie table standing desk that I made. So we're going to cut up a bunch of pieces and get ready to put this thing together. So let's skip ahead and get to putting it together. Okay, so here's a shot of the jig put together. My circular saw with a chainsaw attachment that I bought at Hobo Freight. It's a 12-inch bar and the saw is going to ride along those two top rails to cut my cookies. I just figuring out here how to put some guides on it so that the saw stays square with the log as we cut. And I'll be back in just a minute and show you the finished jig. So here's the completed jig. As you can see, there's two pieces of 3/4 inch aluminum angle iron screwed to the top rails, and that'll keep the saw nice and straight as I cut these logs. I countersunk some screws to hold those angle irons down to the wood, and then I built a little table to set my log on so that I can get the log as high as possible in the jig. The problem that I had was the bar on that saw is only 12 inches, so I have to get that thing as high as possible to get it to cut most of the way through. And here you can see the cut. It worked really well to cut these logs. The only thing that I'll probably do in the future is some type of a jack that I can put under the logs to raise and lower them easier. You know, this table was built purposely for this particular log and the cookies that I'm cutting. But as you can see, it cuts square, and it cuts pretty darn fast. I was really surprised with this inexpensive little attachment for my skill saw. It cut better than I thought it would. It did a good job. I wish the bar was longer, but then you run into the problems of, is the skill saw going to be powerful enough to cut through it? Don't know. And maybe we'll do something different in the future. I've honestly thought about doing something with a regular chainsaw and a pivot. I've seen some stuff online. But this was something inexpensive that I could throw together to cut these cookies and get them nice and square. Now, if you noticed, it didn't cut all the way through it. And so I'm going to have to finish it up the normal way. But I've got a deep enough cut that it'll hold the saw square and allow everything to work. You can see I've marked for another cookie and getting everything lined up. Like I said, it was kind of a pain the way that bottom table is. And down the road, I'm probably going to modify it to make it easier to use, because you can see I'm struggling to hold that log up and try to get it cut. But hey, it works, and it did pretty good. Now we're getting smart. Move the table clear under, since the saw doesn't go all the way through that log, and we can get things lined up just where we want them and hold everything in place. It's nice because you can get all the cookies cut to the exact thickness that you want. Much harder to do freehand with a chainsaw, even if you're marking them. It just doesn't work as well as you'd think it would. So this was a definite improvement. So I finished up the first cut through of all the cookies. Like I said, the bar didn't go all the way through. So now we'll pull it out, we'll turn it over, and we can use those saw cuts as a guide to finish off cutting these cookies. And I'll show you how that works here. So there it is. 5 nice, flat, consistent sized cookies cut in just a few minutes. Those things are nice enough. I won't have to put them on a flattening jig. I can just sand them down first pass with a belt sander, and they'll be ready to go for a table or a stool or what have you. I was really surprised how well that little bar that I bought at Hobo Freight for, I believe, $50 cut through those cookies. The saw didn't bog down at all. It had no problems.